Welcome back to the Virtual Elephant YouTube channel. I'm Chris Muchler, Principal Enterprise Architect and VCDX 257. In this video, I am going to show you how to implement static application security testing using Bandit as part of your CI/CD pipelines inside of GitLab. In this video, we're going to walk through also how to add unit tests for Python code to be able to know that the code that you're developing will continue to work with the ecosystem around it. So let's jump right in and let's get started. This latest video builds upon the two previous videos where I talked about how to implement and operationally mature your CI/CD pipelines using GitLab as well as ArgoCD for platform tools. And then within your pipelines, being able to leverage Trivy as well as Flake 8 link testing for your Python code to show you how to be able to build a pipeline that is mature from a security perspective, as well as having a high degree of confidence that the code that you're developing as it gets promoted through your pipelines from dev to stage to production will be resilient and continue to operate within your ecosystem. This last video covers how to implement static application security testing as part of our process of shifting left security earlier on inside of our CI/CD pipelines. And this again is another crucial step in being able to mature operationally how we're running our platforms that our developers and platform engineers are leveraging, and ultimately being able to deliver a service out to our end users. So let's jump right in and I'll show you quickly how I was able to leverage an open source tool called Bandit to be able to perform static application security testing on the Python code that I've been developing for a number of microservices applications. If you haven't already watched the two previous videos where I walk through the first set of things that we've done to first establish the CI/CD pipelines in GitLab and deploy the applications through ArgoCD into a number of different Kubernetes clusters, please check out the video above and make sure that you catch up. And then this video is really going to build upon the previous two and walk you through how to kind of do this final step in our journey towards operational maturity. So if you're not already familiar, I'm running ArgoCD as a way to deploy the applications within my Kubernetes environment. And this ArgoCD instance actually is connected to 4 different clusters. The first cluster that it's connected to is the one in which ArgoCD itself is running in. And this is my primary Kubernetes cluster that I run within my home lab to be able to perform some monitoring metrics, be able to gather monitoring metrics, as well as be able to build Grafana dashboards and test new things. And then it's connected to 3 clusters that have been deployed by Rancher itself, a dev, a stage, and a prod cluster. And depending on the application that I've deployed, and if you go back and watch the first video, I show you how to leverage the Python pipeline GitHub repository that I've pushed up to be able to show you how to graduate an application from dev to stage in your pipeline and manage it through ArgoCD. Now here on the screen is my ArgoCD instance, and you can see that I have 3 applications running, the Cisco SNMP monitoring app, my fping monitoring app, and then my SignalWave app. Those 3 are all available on my GitHub page for you to download and play with for yourself. And then you can see the 4th tile here is for my InfluxDB token that I have that's being leveraged by both the fping monitoring app as well as the Cisco SNMP monitoring app. But if we click here on Cisco SNMP monitoring app real quick, you'll see the application definition, the secret, and then the deployment. And then you can see over time there have been a number of deployments that have been set out to the Kubernetes cluster, and we can see the current one that is running, and we can see that it is healthy and everything looks good. And this is a way for us to be able to monitor how ArgoCD is managing new deployments of our containers as we push them through our CI/CD pipeline. But going back to our GitLab repository and what we're running here, we're going to take a look at Cisco SNMP. And as we talked about in the second video of this series on how to be able to implement Trivy as part of our CI/CD pipelines. This next step in leveraging Bandit to be able to perform security testing against the actual Python code itself to make sure that we haven't implemented any bad practices or introduced any malware or left ourselves open for, any sort of exploit that might be out there. This is that next iteration on that previous video. So you can see here, and you've probably become familiar with, we're really going to talk about this gitlab-ci YAML file that we're going to be leveraging. And this YAML file is really what defines our pipeline itself. And so you should see some familiar things in here that we've discussed in the previous videos. We have this workflow, so it's set up so that we'll always run the workflow unless the commit has only been to the README or the install file within the repository. Otherwise, it's going to go through these stages, and we have a test, a build, a scan, an SBOM, as well as a deploy stage that we've defined. So you will remember from the previous videos that test stage, that's where we were doing the lint testing to make sure that from a syntax perspective, our Python scripts that we've been writing are adherent to best practices. And this is going to be taken to the next level by introducing Bandit. Now, what Bandit is going to do is it's actually going to scan the Python code itself from a security perspective, and it's going to be very static, meaning that it's going to run every time within the pipeline, and it's going to be updated based off of whatever the most recent version that Bandit has that we're building into this container. And so I've chosen to implement this as part of the first test stage. So in order for the container to actually be built, it first has to pass both the Flake 8 lint testing as well as the Bandit static application security testing first before it will go on. And so I've renamed this now to Flake 8 test as well as Bandit SAST test. And they're both part of that test stage. They're both building a Python 3.11 container, and then they're executing their actual tasks. So you can see here, it's a simple command from a Bandit perspective. Again, this is a very low bar of entry to be able to introduce static application security testing within your pipelines. And it's a great tool to be able to, for you to start leveraging with very little overhead. But you can basically just run the Bandit test. Now you can run it against the entire repository, or you can do like I've done here. And I've actually specified the two specific Python applications that I've created for my Cisco SNMP monitoring. And then it's going to format the output in JSON. It's going to look for severity level high and above, and it's going to look for a high confidence level. And then it's going to produce a report. And I'll show you where to see that report as part of an artifact within the pipeline from the GitLab's UI as well when we're done. And then we've stated here, allow failure to be false. And again, we've tagged it for Docker so that our GitLab runner that we've created will actually catch it and execute this pipeline task for us. Now, once it's done, we've also added this unit tests section. Now, this section is really going to be dependent entirely upon the application or applications that you're creating and writing within your environment. So what I've done is really just created a Pytest script. I'll show it to you in the repository. I've created a directory in the repository called tests where I've put this script, and then the Pytest command executes it and checks for certain things that the Cisco SNMP Python application should be able to produce for us. If you remember back in that very first video where I showed you the Python pipeline repository, we actually had a unit test in there that was looking for specific endpoints that React web server was producing. And as long as those were there, then it actually executed this phase. I've now moved my unit tests out as well to be its own separate thing. You can also see here on the unit test that I don't want to run them unless the Flake 8 and the Bandit tests have been successful. So that's what this needs Bandit SAST and Flake 8 SAST lines are all about. So once those two pass, and they'll run in parallel, once they pass, then the unit tests will be run. And then once the unit tests will run, it'll go down through the rest of our pipeline. It'll build the container image, and then it'll hand it off to Trivy to be able to do the vulnerability scanning, as well as the image vulnerability scanning and creating that SBOM, pushing that SBOM up into the GitLab repo itself, and then actually updating the YAML files for Kubernetes that ArgoCD is monitoring changes for to then deploy the latest version of the application based off of the pipeline definitions that I've created. So this GitLab-ci file, once again, is really the core focus of everything that we're doing from a CI/CD perspective and creating the pipelines and the rules around the pipelines. And the more you do, the easier it is for you to be able to, one, have confidence in the code that you're pushing out to your applications, but also you have to make sure that your developers and platform engineers are adhering to the best practices that you are implementing for your organizations. And certainly from a minimum, I feel at this point, from an operational maturity perspective, just pushing code out there, right? That's not operationally mature. We want to make sure that we've actually shifted left this security focus and incorporated security as a first-class citizen within our CI/CD pipelines. In the past, when I've sat on VCDX panels, security was certainly part of the architecture review process and a key point in the blueprint itself for earning your VCDX certification. But it was always jokingly the bastard stepchild. We've really moved far beyond that now, and security really has to be a core focus of everything that we're doing within our environments, within our infrastructure, and certainly within our applications, because we don't want to be vulnerable to bad actors out there. We don't want to leave a large number of surface vectors for which that they can attack and try and get personal information or credit card information or what have you about your end users and exploit that data in a negative way. And we certainly don't want to leave ourselves open to malware, right? And having our environments locked down as many of these bad actors are doing now with malware out in the industry. So we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can. So establishing best practices as part of our CI/CD pipelines is a massive step forward in that operational maturity. So let's jump right over here. We're going to come back to build, and we're going to go to jobs here for just a moment. And we're going to look at the recent jobs that this Cisco SNMP monitoring repository has actually executed. And you can see here all of the green at the top as I've introduced now Bandit as well as those unit tests. So again, as we're looking at this is going to be at the top. It's going to be the very last job that was executed. So that's that deploy phase where it's updating the YAMLs. But if we look all the way down here, we can see now that we have the Flake 8 test as well as the Bandit SAST test, and then the unit tests being executed as part of our pipeline. And once those are done, then we see it move on to those other steps that we've covered, including building the Docker container itself and then handing it off to Trivy. Now, once all of this is done, then ArgoCD is going to notice the changes to the GitHub repository, see that there's a new container, and we've defined within our Kubernetes YAML files that we always want to pull the most recent version of the container as our image pool policy to make sure that we're always getting the most recent version that we expect to be getting. We don't want to end up out there with an older version expecting that there's this new version with a fix in it and it actually not be running. And so once we've done that, then the pipeline is actually going to execute and allow ArgoCD to grab the changes and do a blue-green deployment of the application out into the Kubernetes cluster that you've specified as the destination for that application. Now, one of the other things that you saw and we said was that we were now generating a report as part of our Bandit testing. So if we come over here to artifacts now, still under the build menu on the left-hand side, if we come to artifacts, now what we can do here is we can actually see within the environment, we can see Bandit SAST. Again, I got that misspelling, so just ignore that for the video, but you can see now we have our artifacts, our metadata, a report in JSON, as well as a job log itself. And we can actually download those reports to be able to see what they're doing here. And so as we skip over here, you can see, let me make this larger for a moment. This is the job report from the actual Bandit test that it performed. So you can see here, we kind of came out good with zeros all across the board. Certainly if it flagged something here, then you would be able to glean information from that log file to understand what you need to go in and change. But coming back to the GitLab UI, the other thing that I did want to share with you and show you in this video was actually some of the log information from the jobs itself. So one of the interesting things here now that we can do is we can click on the Bandit test. And again, this is going to bring up the log itself so you can see what was run. You can see that it built a container, came down here and it ran the command for us. It said whether or not there were any exclude tests and that it wrote the job out to it. And certainly you can also come over here and download the artifacts themselves, or if you just want to see the SAST report, you can actually click on it there and grab that same JSON file that we got when we went over to the artifacts. Now, the other thing to check out is our unit tests themselves. And so what we've done here is now when you click on our unit tests, job that was executed successfully, you can actually see progress as it goes through the different unit tests. As it passes each thing and it tells you the status of it, it also gives you a percentage of, a tick box as it goes through until eventually that it's 100% complete. You can see that 6 passed with 3 warnings, and it took about 2 seconds for that to run. So let's show you what I've done from a unit test perspective that is specific to the Cisco SNMP monitoring app that I'm running to gather metrics on my Cisco servers. So if we come over here, now you can see this tests directory that didn't exist before. And in here, we have this test SNMP polling Python script. And this is the unit test that I've created. And you can have any number of these in here based off of the application that you're writing and creating. But really what it's doing is it's testing some round time to interval to be able to determine if it's exact or not exact. It's doing an SNMP walk to make sure that the things that the script actually looking for are actually found. That way, if they were to change, because I did a firmware upgrade on one of the Cisco switches and now suddenly something is different, this unit test would pick it up. And really, you can just set this up to test anything that you want it to. And again, we've made it conditional so that these tests have to pass. Both the Flake 8, the Bandit, as well as the unit tests all need to pass in order for it to move on to that stage in the pipeline where it's actually going to be building the Docker container itself and pushing it up to Harbor for then Trivy to go and scan. So as I oftentimes stress to all of you out there, operational maturity is something that's near and dear to my heart. I really think that in 2025, understanding where we are today from a maturity perspective and where we're trying to go and what is in the middle there for us to be able to mature better operationally. This is one of the things that I see so many organizations fail when they get to a certain scale for their environments. Once things get so large that we feel we're in this constant churn of lifecycle activities and deployment activities and onboarding new users and new applications. Once we've gotten to that point, leveraging tools like automation and certainly automating a CI/CD pipeline is going to be so crucial to us from an operational maturity perspective. We need to have a high degree of confidence that the code we are pushing out there, one, that it's being pushed every time in a consistent basis. 2, that we've taken into consideration security from the get-go, and we have a high degree of confidence that the code we're putting out there is actually secure for both our platform engineers as well as our end users. And then certainly we need it to be prescriptive. When we automate things like our CI/CD pipelines, now suddenly we're able to do things more often. We're able to spend the time in that gap to find those areas where we can now focus our efforts on maturing in different places. And so from a platform engineering, a DevOps engineering perspective, focusing on a fully automated CI/CD pipeline that's capable of implementing tools like Bandit, tools like Trivy, being able to implement security policy, right? If you're leveraging things like Cilium, automate those security policies that you're building around your applications and include them in the CI/CD pipelines. Once we've done that, And once we've matured there in that CI/CD pipeline process, now it allows us to shift our focus and look for other areas where we need to be directing our efforts to be able to automate more, to be able to, again, mature operationally. There are many things that we can continue to be doing with this CI/CD pipeline. These 3 videos really kind of give you a starter course. It's a quick start program. If you just do nothing else but these 3 things, I think that you're going to be much better off than maybe where you are today if you've not incorporated anything from a security perspective or a scanning perspective or a code validation perspective. If you've done none of that thus far, these 3 videos will at least help you get jump started in that area of CI/CD pipelines and being able to leverage tools that are out there today that have a very low bar of entry, as well as are operationally very easy to incorporate into your existing processes. So this is a great first step. I encourage you to continue on to find other areas. Some of the things that we can consider in the future is maybe how we introduce an AI agent so that when a unit test fails or a Flake 8 link check fails, maybe now instead of the developer having to go and fix it himself or herself and then checking in the code, maybe we have an agent watching for failures in those stages that then goes and fixes the problems automatically for us, rechecks things off, which will then trigger a whole new pipeline to be executed. Those are some of the things that we can consider going forward. Certainly, this is a never-ending process. Again, you have to balance it with what is giving me the most value versus the time that I'm investing in it. We don't want to implement tools or processes just for the sake of implementing them. We want them to have a specific purpose. Everything should be tied back to a business or a technical requirement. And ultimately, what we're trying to do is actually ensure that our organizations are not just operationally mature, but that the code or the product that we're developing and producing out for our end users is providing value. If we're not accomplishing those 2 things, then what are we doing? And I would encourage you to look at your organizations, look at your teams, find opportunities for improvement. Be honest with yourselves first and foremost on where you are mature and where you are not mature in your processes and in your operational tasks and runbooks and tools that you're using. If you have 5 tools that are doing the same thing across 5 different teams, ask yourself why. Are we really operationally mature if we're leveraging that many tools? There can always be a case made for each one, and certainly you might end up with more than one. But do you need 5? That's a question that you'll have to ask for yourself and answer for yourself and your organizations. As always, if you're enjoying this content, please make sure that you subscribe to the Virtual Elephant YouTube channel. Turn on notifications so that you know when new videos come out, and hit that like button and leave a comment below. Let me know if this has been helpful to you, what I can do in the future to continue to help you operationally mature. Reach out to me on X @Chris Mutchler, and I appreciate and look forward to talking to you all next time.